hand it over to Ms. Taylor.
Thank you. Tanisha Taylor with the San Joaquin Council of Governments, and I'm going to present a brief update on our draft 2014 Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy. We have, as Cindy and Jessica have identified, been coordinating with Delta Stewardship Council staff in the development of our plan, as well as moving into kind of the next step, which will be identifying how we will and if we will grant any exemptions from the Delta Stewardship Plan process. So today I'm going to give a brief presentation overview so you can kind of know what you're going to expect before you see it, and then run into the presentation. So just to give a little bit of a background on who SJCOG is will be the first slide, what the draft 2014 RTP-SES is, draft 2014 RTP-SES relationship to the Delta Plan, because I think that's very important. It does have a very good relationship, and we'll see through a couple of maps on the slides how we relate to the Delta Stewardship Plan, the exemption process, and the schedule and next steps for our 2014 RTP-SES. So who is SJCOG? As Jessica has identified, we are the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the San Joaquin County. We are a little different than some of the MPOs that you've seen before in SJCOG and MTC, in that we are a single county entity, where MTC and SJCOG are multi-county entities. So we only deal with issues within San Joaquin County. The SJCOG mission statement, just to give a little background, the mission of SJCOG is to partner with local governments, to the private sector and community groups as the forum, facilitator, and administrator of regional programs, and to advocate for regional and interregional issues like the Delta Plan in the development of a comprehensive strategy to achieve resolutions. So what is the Regional Transportation Plan? For us, the Regional Transportation Plan is a 20-year minimum long-range transportation investment plan. Our plan is actually 26 years, so it goes beyond that 20-year minimum. What is the Sustainable Community Strategy? As you've heard, it's a new process for us. It was identified in 2008 with Senate Bill 375, and it is a coordinated land use and transportation plan that demonstrates ability to achieve greenhouse gas emissions reductions. And why is SJCOG required to prepare an RTP and an SES? Federal and state, it's a federal and state requirement for coordinated transportation planning and the allocation of funding. And I've already discussed SB 375 has required that we develop a sustainable community strategy that meets greenhouse gas emissions reductions if possible. And for San Joaquin COG, those emissions reductions are a 5% reduction in 2020 and a 10% reduction by 2035. And I would just note that our plan is anticipated to meet that 5 and 10% reduction. So what types of questions will the San Joaquin Council of Governments draft regional transportation plan and sustainable community strategies answer? It'll answer what the region will look like potentially. We're anticipating an additional 340,000 people in San Joaquin County and an additional 92,000 jobs. It's a big question. How do you fit those people within the county? How do you minimize the impacts to the Delta, as well as some of the other things that we find valuable within San Joaquin County? How do you minimize the impacts to important farmlands? So in terms of how we developed our draft 2014, we developed our draft 2014 RTP-SES based on 4 building blocks. Those 4 building blocks are the growth, location, and intensity, the development pattern, housing choices, and transportation strategies. As part of the development of our draft 2014 RTP and SES, we held several public workshops, a board workshop, several listening sessions to gain input from our stakeholders as well as our local jurisdictions in terms of what their vision for the region should be. So moving into the relationship with the Delta Plan, you've heard Jessica talk about the consistency with urban boundaries, Delta Plan Policy DPP1, that strengthen the existing Delta communities while protecting farmland and open space. SJCOG's draft 2014 RTP-SES is anticipated to develop over 10,000 acres less prime farmland than growing as we're growing today. That's quite an achievement in terms of reducing the footprint of growth in San Joaquin County. The second bullet point that Jessica spoke to was consistency with habitat restoration boundaries, or land should be set aside for future habitat restoration needs, including the San Joaquin Multi-Species Conservation Plan. As we'll see in some of the slides coming up in the maps in terms of the consistency with the Delta Plan, we are preserving that vital habitat restoration boundaries in those vital habitat areas. I would note that the San Joaquin Multi-Species Conservation Plan is the plan developed by SJCOG Incorporated, which is an arm of SJCOG, the MPO. Consistency with flood risk reduction. Again, we'll go to the maps and see how we're reducing flood risk by limiting the growth spheres to less than business as usual. SJCOG's draft 2014 RTP SES is anticipated to reduce household water consumption by over 40% from growth as we know it today. So how do we determine consistency between our plan, the Regional Transportation Plan, and the Delta Plan? As I've identified, we're expecting over 340,000 new people within San Joaquin County. How are we going to house those people is the question at hand in the map, and I know you can't see it, so in the next couple of slides, we'll actually zoom into some of the areas that you see on the map. But in the broader overview map, the pink areas are the Regional Transportation Plan and where growth is anticipated to happen over the life of the Regional Transportation Plan Sustainable Community Strategy. As we move into the next slide, we'll start to see how some of those areas are consistent. In this slide, we have the city of Stockton and the city of Lathrop. You'll see the urban spheres in the crosshatched areas, along with the pink growth, which is the growth anticipated to house those 340,000 people that we've been talking about throughout my presentation. As you can see, those crosshatched areas are areas that are under the Delta Plan are identified for urban growth. As you can see, our growth is within those areas identified with urban growth. I think that's a compliment to our plan and how we've worked with our local jurisdictions in terms of coordination with not only the Delta Plan, but also their general plans, because that's where implementation of these projects will actually occur, is through the implementation of each of our local jurisdictions' general plans. As we move a little further, we see the city of Tracy, and again, we've been coordinating with your staff, and we believe that, again, you see the pink areas within the crosshatch markings for the Delta Plan urbanized boundaries. We move into the San Joaquin County area for Mountain House, and it is a little different looking, but the crosshatch areas really are replaced by a boundary in this map versus a crosshatched area. So again, you see the pink growth is within that boundary area for the Delta Plan for urbanized growth. So we do believe that our 2014 RTP SES is consistent with the plan in terms of the urbanized growth, reducing flood risk and things like that, and all of the policies that we've kind of heard from your staff in our notice of preparation for our environmental impact report. We're continuing to coordinate with Delta Stewardship Council staff, and I think we'll continue to coordinate on the consistency determination and how we implement things moving into the future. So moving into the next slide, I'll talk about that second piece of the process that Jessica and Cindy highlighted, which is the exemption process. For the exemption process, we've all kind of come to know the term covered actions. And for covered actions, you can kind of see in the red, covered action does not include something that's consistent with the SJCOG Sustainable Community Strategy or an alternative planning scenario that meets ARB's GHG reduction targets. As I've indicated, our plan is anticipated to meet ARB's 5% in 2020 and 10% in 2035 target for greenhouse gas emissions reductions. What that means is SJCOG, by law, has the ability to exempt projects from the covered actions process. I know that's of great concern, and coordination is vital in terms of the process as to how SJCOG will implement that process. Moving into the next slide, I think we want to acknowledge the process is new to SJCOG. We do not have a process currently. The Sustainable Community Strategy, this is our first Sustainable Community Strategy, as well as the first time we've worked with your staff, and we'd like to continue working with your staff. We think it will be vital to the success of both of our agencies and implementation of both of our plans for us to have a successful good working relationship together. In order to implement the exemption process, I think the Delta Stewardship Council staff, SJCOG staff, and our local jurisdictions will need to coordinate the process, recognizing that SJCOG does not have land use authority and we will not be the agency implementing these projects. But coordination will be vital in terms of making those consistency determinations if consistency determinations are needed. We anticipate implementation will require continued coordination between both of our staffs, and again, we think that's very vital. So moving into the schedule and the next steps for our regional transportation plan, we did release our regional transportation plan for a 55-day public comment period on February 27, 2014, with comments due later in April. I believe April 23rd is the date for that. On March 10th, we released our draft regional transportation plan, sustainable community strategy, environmental impact report for a 45-day comment period, with the same deadline for public comments. We're going to have a public hearing at our board meeting tonight at 5 p.m. on our regional transportation plan, sustainable community strategy, and an additional public hearing on April 10th for the RTP SES, as well as our environmental impact report. It's anticipated that our board will consider action on the draft 2014 regional transportation plan / sustainable community strategy in June of 2014. That meeting is generally at 5 p.m. And in terms of next steps for the plan and coordination with the Delta Stewardship Council and Delta Stewardship Council staff, we believe that continued coordination with Delta Stewardship Council staff as we're moving towards the adoption of our plan in June of 2014 is vital, and the development of the exemption process in coordination with SJCOG, local jurisdictions, and Delta Stewardship Council staff is also an identified next step. So with that, thank you for inviting us. We believe that this is a good opportunity, and we'd like to continue to have these coordinating opportunities to work together between the Delta Stewardship Council as well as SJCOG. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. My contact information is up on the screen and is part of the PowerPoint presentation as well, should you have any additional questions after today.
Tanisha, thank you. Any questions? Phil?